It's Wild Card Weekend 2025, one of our favorite weekends of the year. To start it out, we've got a 6-game overall wild card slate on tap. We're going to talk through each of the 6 games. Of course, we're going to start with the 2-game slate today, talk about some thoughts there. Of course, the biggest slate is tomorrow. 3 games, huge Millie Maker on top on DraftKings. We are a DK partner. Of course, AP, I know you've seen the news that there's some hazardous weather here in Atlanta, but like a true professional, we have power. We are here. We're ready to talk about the NFL. How are you?
Doing really well. Actually, right before the show, I watched that final drive of the Mahomes and company, the champs, the defending champs, 2-time defending champs. It's going to be fun. I mean, they obviously get the week off. So, I mean, for me, I don't have a ton to talk about today since there's no Chiefs on the slate, but I'm going to do my best.
Were you able to get your pants back on in time for the show?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just can't stand up.
Okay.
We'll leave everyone guessing. How about that?
Travis, good morning. It is morning now. We're happy to see you. And how's your weekend going? We're kicking it off here today. It's a little earlier for you. I'm glad you could make it.
No. Oh,
no.
How do we start off this one?
Oh, no.
Sir, it's clearly early. No, on the mute, not good. I made an executive decision. I've already decided it was a bad decision. The alarm went off, JT, and you know what I said? I said, I'm not going to get coffee. I'm gonna ride this out and hope for the best. That was a mistake. So I'm clearly need some caffeine in me, but hey, we're gonna power through and we're gonna have a good time. And hopefully, Quinn and Pooh can maybe Quinn can make an appearance to brighten my day and get me excited.
All right. I mean, honestly, you could have just left yourself on mute if that's what you were going to say. DC, how are you this lovely morning?
I'm doing well. Those are tough decisions that Travis has to make when you go to bed, at 5:45 in the morning after slaying your teenage foes on Call of Duty all night, and you get 3 hours of sleep, and you got to choose between coffee and more sleep. I mean, that's a big decision to make. It seems like Travis chose poorly to begin his day here on Wild Card Weekend. So hopefully he'll do better picking winners for the people.
We'll see that energy level come up here as the show goes on. Quinn is asleep, though, Travis. She is asleep behind me. I don't know if I can we'll see if we can get a shot of her. She's a little under the weather, which is weird for a pug. She's a little congested. So we had to spend about $700 in 2 different vet visits this week to get some antibiotics, some nose drops for a pug, which it's not easy to get them in there, and she sneezes them right out, but she's on the mend. She's on the mend. So, all right.
Very well spent money.
I mean, those vets are like pure scam artists.
Egregious.
Old dog, they tried to convince me to get her teeth clean. I'm like, at first I'm like,
the teeth cleaning is right. Yeah,
get me a quote. They come back with the quote. It's like $1,500. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm not gonna spend $1,500.
And for the pug, they tell my wife this. Well, we'll have to sedate her, and she's like, no, absolutely not happening. So we've got some chew treats that help with the breath and other stuff. But the teeth cleaning every time. You're right. It's sort of like, why do you want us to do this so badly? But We'll get into this, guys. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. We will be able to get to those because we're not up against lock here. Of course, the first game today at 4:30. We are going to talk through all the games, talk through some, as we are known to do on the Off the Chalk show, some pivots, ways you could get a little bit different from the field, which you're going to need to do. You got a 2-game slate, you got a 3-game slate. The prizes are okay for the 6-game slate, but still, I don't think that's where a lot of you are going to be spending the bulk of your bankroll. So we'll get through that, drop those questions in here. We'll start off, Travis, with you with the first game. This is the Chargers making their return to the playoffs. Great first year for Jim Harbaugh back in the NFL. They travel to Houston to take on the Texans. They are 2.5-point favorites. They opened as 3-point favorites, now down to 2.5. Totals come down a little bit, 41.5. And part of that is the Chargers have gotten some of their defensive players back who have missed, shoring up what was throughout most of the season a very good unit. The Texans, of course, were missing Will Anderson for a few games. That led to them having a bit of a dip. He's back now. But this Texans offense, Travis, it just hasn't been very good lately. Of course, we know about the injuries. Stephon Diggs lost for the season. Tank Dell lost for the season, which is actually, I think, a much bigger loss than Stephon Diggs. Joe Mixon, who started off the year very, very hot, really, really tough sled lately. What are your thoughts here on the Chargers and the Texans?
Yeah, I mean, to kick it off with this game, I think it's a pretty good game to start off. I know people say it's kind of lame, but I actually like this game from a DFS perspective a little bit. Listen, we do need some value plays. Like Justin Herbert, I do think is a good value at $6K at the quarterback position. Keep in mind, we've been paying down at quarterback all season long. Well, you're not really spending down at quarterback today on the 6-game slate, right? It's just, I mean, there's just no one really to spend down for. There's like a couple options. When it comes to the 2-game slate, I do think that Justin Herbert, 6K, I think he's better than going to some of these other options in CJ Stroud and Russell Wilson. And then, of course, since we are playing the playoffs, there's all these good players now, right? There's not as much value, where I do think we have to use the quarterback position a little bit as a spend down. The other problem that you have with that is, if we're talking about the 6-gamer, is like a guy like Josh Allen can just break the slate, right? Someone like Lamar Jackson, they can just absolutely break it. So it's a weird balancing act that you have to have on the slate with trying to figure out where to spend and where not to. I do think Justin Herbert is a good spend down option for sure on this slate. So he is someone that I'll definitely look at. J.K. Dobbins at 6.2K. He got 19 and 18 carries the past 2 weeks. It does seem like he is not a bad play at 6.2K. And another thing with the running back position, if you're looking at that 6-gamer specifically, there's not a lot of running back value in general. So that's another issue you're going to run into. So I think Dobbins, though, he's a good play. I prefer him over Mixon for the $1,000 discount. Then we get the receivers in this game. Nico Collins is 7.8K. You'll definitely have to make some decisions on the 2-game slate of like, because you can't spend for every single really expensive option, right? If you want Lamar, Derrick Henry, Nico Collins, Ladd McConkey, you just can't fit them all. So you are going to have to make decisions on that. That's going to be a big decision point. But Nico Collins is the only guy in town. So I think one of the decisions you'll have to make on this slate is possibly Nico or Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson. Only 2 of those 3 on the 2-gamer. Ladd McConkey, 6.8K. I do think he's not a bad play, but I'd rather get up to Nico Collins. And then Quentin Johnston at 4.8K. I actually like him a lot. With Josh Palmer being out, I do think that opens up some opportunity for him. And then tight end wise, I do think Will Dissly is in play, not only on the 2-gamer, but on the 6-gamer. I actually think he's an interesting value at that price tag. Again, with no Josh Palmer, there are some more targets to go around. It's not a lot, but I do think Will Dissly's opportunity it's definitely worth attacking. And I think some people are going to overlook that on this slate.
DC with the Chargers here. Obviously, Quentin Johnston coming off a massive game, nearly 200 yards receiving. The last 3 weeks of the season, they've gotten Darius Davis involved in packages here. Not a lot, but enough to get into the end zone. He could be a value that people look at. And then the other thing about this first game here, DC, is that it's the only game on Saturday. Obviously, there's 2 games. Ravens-Steelers playing each other a third time. We know all about these divisional games and how they tend to reduce in volume, reduce in scoring. Is that different because of the Ravens' powerful offense? We'll talk about that. But this is a non-divisional game. This is one where you might expect that it could go over the 41.5 total if the Texans' offense shows up here today. It's still difficult. If you're looking at box scores, is it harder to click Joe Mixon today? Although the rush game has been where you can get ahead on the Chargers over the second half of the season. They've got some pieces back now. What do you think here?
Yeah, looking into Mixon, I honestly didn't play him much this year. I didn't really expect him to kind of, have a little bit of a resurgence,
right,
leaving Baltimore in that offense, obviously, in the middle or maybe even the twilight of his career as a running back. But he had a really strong season. Now, it was very up and down, and it did end in 3 duds in a row. However, he was one of the more matchup dependent, matchup sensitive, whatever you want to use for that. Running backs in the entire league. Last 3 games faced Tennessee, Baltimore, KC, all good rushing defenses. If you look at his good games, they mostly came against teams that struggled for the most part against running backs. Jacksonville, Dallas Cowboys, right? The Patriots, the Colts. And then he struggled in the tough games. And this is not an easy matchup for Mixon, but I do think attacking on the ground is probably Houston's best way or best bet to move the ball here. So I do think, JT, that the plan for Houston is probably to lean on a pretty good defense, right? They're at home. They've got some guys healthy and a lot of Joe Mixon. I think that's probably the plan for Houston. Whether or not that works, we'll see. But I do think it brings Mixon back in play. And, you know, I think a lot of people are going to click on $7,200 Joe Mixon, see 3 bad games in a row. I think he's a player people, I mean, we're guilty of it here at RPS, kind of want to fade anyway. So I think we'll get pretty low ownership on Mixon. So he's been growing on me a little bit throughout the week. I do like him. I do think I actually prefer him over Nico Collins. I'm definitely not playing both of those guys, at least on the full 6-game slate. Maybe on Saturday you could make the case just with limited options. But I think it's one or the other for the most part. And I actually lean the Mixon side, which is not where I anticipated ending up on this game. But that's kind of where the research and numbers led me personally. No problem with Nico. It's just hard to trust this passing offense with CJ Stroud. I mean, they weren't what people expected. Then they lose Stephon Diggs. Then they lose Tank Dell. Haven't really rebounded from that. And I do kind of think it's Nico or bust. And I'll be, I guess, kind of on the bust side. So not playing Stroud, not going to play much Nico, some Mixon. And then the Chargers side, I mean, just, you know, without doing any research, Ladd McConkey would be the guy that you would look at. And the research confirms that the Texans have struggled against the slot. They've got very good boundary corners. We see McConkey absolutely eating out of the slot. That's kind of what I expected from the Chargers coming into the year. It took a while for Ladd to get going. No surprise really, given the rookie status. Got to get on the same page with Herbert, but they certainly are now. And I know Quentin Johnston's coming off that huge game in Week 18. I'm not putting a ton of stock into that Week 18 game, honestly, and I think this is a Ladd game. So he is by far my favorite Charger. I don't mind pairing him with Herbert on either slate, who is cheap enough, I think, to roll the dice. I just don't – I mean, Dobbins, this dude has had so many injuries throughout his career. He's looked okay since coming back, but –
it's a tough rushing matchup as well. We all say, look, Harbaugh's runners are going to get there. The rushing game usually does well. This team has not allowed a lot on the ground.
Exactly. And, you know, they did get Edwards back. Like, we don't know what the rushing share is going to look like for Dobbins. He's not at all cheap, really. 6,200, doesn't do a lot in the passing game. So for me, he's not super interesting. I think this is McConkey all day for the Chargers. Quentin Johnston would be the second option for me. I don't think I trust any of the other wide receivers, you know, the Dario Davises or the Charks of the world to play them. And then, Disley, I think, is a fine play. So not going to have a ton of exposure to this game on the 6-game slate. Obviously, on the 2-game slate, a little bit of a different story. You kind of have to have at least a couple pieces from this game to make it all work. Mixon, McConkey, my 2 favorite. I do think you can play either defense in this game if you want to go in that direction as well.
AP, last year, the Texans made the playoffs. Surprisingly, they were the darlings and DeMeco Ryans people were talking about. Of course, CJ Stroud, a rookie of the year candidate last year. And now all of a sudden you have the Chargers, who people are talking about. Public heavily on the Chargers, of course. The one game that Justin Herbert has played in the playoffs did not go so well. But is there any chance that you see this maybe being a little bit of an upset where the Texans can get this game?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Texans at home, Joe Mixon, much like the other guys said, if he can have a big game, I think that's going to be the path here for the Texans. So there's a few ways to tackle this. If you're playing the 6-game slate, you just have to backload. It's a great late swap slate. I think there's a nice edge in that. Yes, you can say, well, everyone's going to do that. Not really the case. Like, I feel like people still like to spread things out, diversify a little bit. And the other reason for the 2-game slate, why I like this first game, is you have more of a defined target tree on both sides. We know the Texans, they got to go through Joe Mixon. They got to go through Nico Collins. Dalton Schultz, pretty much kind of like the touchdown guy. And I could definitely see him snagging one here on the Chargers. And on the Chargers side, it's the Ladd McConkey show. And Will Dissly, viable tight end option as well. And then J.K. Dobbins. We know the Chargers want to establish it. The other factors for the 2-game slate, why I have interest. We have a dome game versus obviously outdoors, sub 30-degree temperature. And the last fact that it's a divisional game, third time playing each other. And with the Ravens, I know we'll get to that game, but without Flowers, like, he is a huge piece of their offense. Yeah, it could be Lamar, Henry just doing their thing, but you can't just assume that like a Nelson Aguilar and Bateman are going to be able to do the things that Flowers did for this offense. I'm not saying that the Ravens are going to lose this game. I'm just saying it might be an uglier game than what Vegas is implying, them scoring 26, 27 points. So that's kind of my thesis for targeting the earlier game, just from like a target share standpoint, McConkey, Nico. And so hopefully we see some points because that's how I'm playing it. Now, in the Saturday, so if you remember, you can go check this out in the Saturday playbook. I have a bunch of different thoughts there. One of the first things I did is somehow, like, these 2-game slates that we've had, the Christmas slate and then last week, the Saturday 2-game slate, the Ravens were on both of them. And it's pretty telling when you look at the optimal lineups. It's Lamar, Henry. It's a common theme. So maybe we all just get I get bent over on this slate because I'm not under on Henry. I'm under on Lamar, and I'm over on the cheaper quarterbacks because what that allows me to do is get the pieces that I think have the more predictable target share, which is the McConkeys, Nikos, and Henry and Mixon kind of the world. And then what I found when building my lineups is you need one cheap piece in there. And so we didn't really talk about values from this game, but I'm really curious if you guys have a strong take on Deontay Johnson. Like, I think from a pure talent standpoint, like he played 35% of snaps last week, 4 targets. They got to find a way, you would think, to work him in because their other receivers are terrible. Like, Mechie's done nothing. Robert Woods, like, I don't know. And so if they could get Deontay Johnson going with Nico, I do think that's kind of interesting from a value standpoint.
Josh D, everybody talked about Dissly. I personally have Dissly 5th of the tight ends on the 2-game slate. I think you're going to see a lot more from Isaiah Likely in this game. AP talked about Flowers out. We're going to get into that game here in a minute. But the guys think he's worth some shares at least. I just think that in order for him to be useful, you're going to have more than Josh Palmer out. I think he's at least the 4th option in that offense behind Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and J.K. Dobbins. AP, will stick with you. We'll go into this second game, which is the Steelers heading into Baltimore. You mentioned it, the 26.5 total for Baltimore, the highest of this 2-game slate. That is a little bit lower than it's been. We've seen them usually around 30. They were around 30 last week in the 2-game slate that you referenced. People are asking about Aguilar, Wallace. Look, I think it's Likely. I think it's Mark Andrews. I think it's Rashad Bateman. But most of all, I think it's Derrick Henry. And when you talk about what are the running back options on this 2-game slate, there are really 3 options that you feel pretty comfortable are more likely than anyone else to get in the optimal. Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, and then J.K. Dobbins. And I rank them that way. Henry, Mixon, Dobbins. I think it's tougher to get behind. Certainly Najee Harris, but even Jaylen Warren. Maybe Justice Hill, who's just 4,500. Maybe that's a way that you could get some value here. If you think that he gets, and he usually does, get some shares out of the backfield, maybe he lines up as a receiver even But 43.5 total. You mentioned the colder weather in Baltimore. Of course, these two teams, AP, they're used to it. This is what they do pretty much every single season. These guys play at this time of year. What are your thoughts here with the Ravens favored by 9.5?
So, like, here's kind of my thought. I'm looking at the Chiefs, and I obviously want the Texans to win because most likely
the Chiefs are on the slate. AP, you got
I'm getting to my point.
We agreed to talk about all games because
I have to find a way to work in some Chiefs conversation. I'm getting to my point. So, like, if the Broncos upset the Bills, like, that would suck. As a Chief, I don't want to face a team that I've already faced twice. Okay. So, like, if you're a Ravens fan right now, you're down Flowers. Yes, you're by far the better team. I'm not taking anything away from that. I think the Steelers, out of all the teams in the playoffs right now, may be the most fraudulent. However, like, it is difficult to just beat a team multiple times, and you're facing a division foe. I think it's a riskier spot than we all think. Now, do I think the Ravens aren't going to get it done? No. I think they move on. I just think it's a little bit closer than we all think. And so when I'm looking at this without Flowers in there, I think the Ravens are going to have to lean on Lamar Henry a little bit more. I like both tight ends. Initially on the surface, stacking double tight ends, I don't know if that's sneaky anymore. I think a lot of people like to do that. And I honestly think there's a lot of really good tight ends on the slate. I found myself having a lot of double tight end builds. You can make the kid Freiermuth, awesome play. Andrews, awesome play. It's like he gets a touchdown every single game. Likely they're going to use him a lot differently now, obviously with Flowers out. So just from a target share standpoint, solid play. And so I found myself with a lot of double tight end builds, and I think that makes a lot of sense on the slate. I think one thing that you have to do is, if you're not playing Lamar, you better make sure Derrick Henry's in your lineup. Like, I just can't see too many paths to where that optimal outcome doesn't have at least one, possibly both of them, just given everything. So, and then it's figuring out, like, Bateman, yeah, he's a fine play, but I don't think it's like, just since Flowers is out, that he's just going to be a lock and absolutely go off. I don't think that at all. And then it's figuring out, maybe I saw Snyder in chat, maybe it's figuring out who the cheap receiver is going to be. I don't really trust Aguilar or Wallace. So Snyder, if you have a sneaky guy on the Ravens side, I'm all ears. And then I'm curious to see where you guys are at. If you can make the case for, like, Russ is 5,300. It's the same thing. It's why CJ Stroud in my core, pairing him with Nico Collins, banking on the skill set of Nico Collins, kind of getting Stroud there. If you get the touchdowns needed, you could potentially make the case with Russ. He's cheap, pair him with Pickens, and what should be a pretty obvious trailing script. So I got the Ravens winning. I think it's going to be an uglier game, though, than we all think.
These games, to that point, these games between Pittsburgh and Baltimore are almost always ugly. Their first matchup of the season, DC, had like a 48-49 total. I think the total, or the end of the game, was like 17-10, 17-13, something like that. Still, though, the question on the cheap Baltimore pieces like a Wallace, like an Aguilar, even if they get 2 catches and a touchdown, is that enough to be optimal on this slate? Generally, in the 2 gamers, it hasn't been. I think potentially the cheaper guy for the Ravens is Justice Hill. Certainly Isaiah Likely is going to be more involved here. But what are your thoughts on the Steelers at the Ravens? And look, no one's mentioned this. AP didn't really talk about this, but is there a world in which you think, 1, the Steelers can put up points, and 2, Russell Wilson can do anything? Because the last 6 weeks, since that big game against Cincinnati, he's looked terrible.
Yeah, I have very, very little faith in Pittsburgh's ability to move the ball here. I mean, we've seen Russell Wilson kind of crater into what we expected with Pittsburgh. They have a non-explosive running game, right, with Najee Harris grinding out the 3 yards a carry. George Pickens, I mean, after that performance in Week 18, hard not to think that he is not in a good place mentally, which we just know is a thing with George Pickens, right? He had like one of the worst games that we've ever seen. He doesn't, to me, seem like a player that's going to like bounce back. He seems like a player who would kind of go especially in a tough matchup, right? Like further into the dark place he seemed to be in Week 18. So I don't really like Pickens here. For Pittsburgh, it's pretty simple for me. I think Freiermuth is a fine, safe play. I think he's going to get 6, 7, 8 targets here. Most of them are pretty safe because they're kind of over the middle type of stuff that Baltimore will maybe allow. So Freiermuth, I like some. And then I think Jaylen Warren, pretty clearly to me, the play over Najee Harris involved more in the pass game. I expect Pittsburgh to be trailing. I think there's a good chance Najee Harris can get some dump offs, which, especially on a 2-game slate, that might be enough. I'll say this too. Pricing, this is the tightest pricing slate that I can ever remember for NFL for a big slate like the 6-gamer that we have. The reason is there's nobody injured. If you look at go look, click on the QB, wide receiver, running back. Like Zay Flowers is like the only injury on any of these teams from the star players. Obviously, we have good teams, so we just have loaded options across the board at every position, and you have to take some value somewhere, even if you don't necessarily like it. For me, Jaylen Warren is kind of one of those plays that I'm considering even on the bigger slate, just to save money, to get guys in like Saquon and Justin Jefferson and Derrick Henry. So Pittsburgh, pretty easy. Warren and Freiermuth, the guys that I'm looking at most closely. Baltimore, I think, is a little more tricky, a little more interesting. Obviously, the return of the loss of Zay Flowers. I do think it's going to be Aguilar who sees the majority of those snaps, but maybe not used in the way that people are, trying to get value out of him will benefit from. One interesting thing, like Zay Flowers is like a tiny dude. He's like 5'8", 5'9", a toothpick out there. Aguilar, one of the better run blocking receivers in the league. He's going to get more snaps. And then obviously Isaiah likely going to be out there, going to play a lot more 2 tight end sets. You throw in the fact of what Derrick Henry has done recently, what Derrick Henry has done typically as season has progressed, right? Getting stronger throughout the year. Clearly still has the speed. I think Derrick Henry is going to get fed in this game. It might not work in the first quarter or the second quarter or the third quarter, but we've seen it 3 games in a row now. Eventually, he finds a crease, and when he does, it's a touchdown from wherever they're at wherever he gets the ball from. So I think Henry is a smash play on both sides. I think he's going to get a ton of work. I think Baltimore, their defense, like Mitch said, has drastically improved. The return of Kyle Hamilton has certainly helped that. And I just think Baltimore is going to have so many possessions here. I think they're going to be able to convert on 3rd downs, and then they're just going to go back to Derrick Henry on 1st and 2nd down. And I think he's going to wear down this Pittsburgh defense and have a monster day. So love Derrick Henry. He is how I'm trying to play Baltimore. And I think most people, you say Zay Flowers out, and like the initial like 1v1 connection you make is, oh yeah, Rashad Bateman's going to kind of pick up that slack. I think he's a fine play, but I don't think, like AP said, I don't think he's some lock to get 10 targets or anything like that. I think if Derrick Henry's working, which I think he will, I think Baltimore leans on him here. I think the big dog going to eat in this one.
I think there's definitely variance in Baltimore's passing game. Travis, if I were George Pickens, I would have had a nervous breakdown already. His quarterback is Russell Wilson. His offensive coordinator is Arthur Smith. His head coach, his only goal is to get the clock to 0. I mean, this is a man, Mike Tomlin, great coach. Looks like he's never having fun out there. So I feel a little bad for George Pickens. I think his talent's wasted on a team like the Steelers. He'll be better when he gets out of there, when he gets to a team that actually wants to run an offense that's dynamic. But for this game, Baltimore-Pittsburgh, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of what DC said. I agree with the Nelson Aguilar stuff. I think they'll do more 2 tight end looks, where that means you're going to want to look at likely a little bit more for sure. Mark Andrews definitely has a good role. Like, I think you can make the argument, like, one reason why double tight end is in play is I think you can make the argument Mark Andrews is a better play than Rashad Bateman, right? And so I do think that Mark Andrews for 300 less is technically a better play than him. And I agree. I don't think Bateman's just like this screaming value. I think he's a value, but I don't think he's just this like amazing one. Typically when someone like Zay Flowers is out, we typically just want to plug and play whoever the next wide receiver is. It's not really the case at this time. So The other crazy thing is when I fired up Saber Sim, I looked at the Sims. And I think it just tells you what's going on with the slate. Not necessarily it's a good idea, but I have way too much Russell Wilson. I got like 20%, which is 20% too much.
That's because no one's going to own him. I mean, that's all that is.
Agreed. I don't think it's just that though, JT. I think it shows how, like DC said earlier, if I want Justin Jefferson, right? If I want Mike Evans, I need value somewhere. That's why I do still like some cheap quarterbacks and like a Justin Herbert, who I did talk about earlier. So that's kind of one of the issues you're going to run into. DC said it right. There's no value on this slate. Like if I had you just take a piece of paper and write down the value plays on this slate, you wouldn't write many names down. It's just there's not a ton. So you really got to think about your salary a little bit. I'm not doing it with Russell Wilson. I'll tell you that. I also don't want to play like Pickens that much, Freiermuth. I don't mind DC's take on the Jalen Warren stuff, just because if you need a value at the running back spot, I don't think that's terrible. But there's another value running back that we'll get to shortly that I think is pretty good. And I think you're going to need a little bit more balanced builds and maybe look for spots to punt. I think tight end is probably the spot we're going to have to punt a little bit to make some stuff work. Yes, Mark Andrews at 4.7 again. He's a really good play. I think he's a better play on the 2-gamer than the 6-gamer. But I do think tight end and defense is going to be a spot that we really need to save, even in the flex too, which is why double tight end, I do feel pretty confident will be in play on the 6-gamer and the 2-game slate.
All right. So that's the 2-gamer. We'll move on now to the Sunday games, Travis, starting with the Broncos heading into Buffalo, 1:00 on Sunday. We have seen the Broncos defense look otherworldly at home, otherworldly against terrible teams like the Jets, like the Raiders. But on the road, look human, giving up a ton of points. Gave up a ton of points to the Bengals. Now they get to face the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. This has a 47.5 total, but they're 8.5-point favorites as well. What do you see here with the Broncos and the Bills?
Yeah, I like some plays in this game. I want to call out James Cook. I know he's not a value, but he seems too cheap, right? At 6.7K, that just seems like a way too cheap of a price tag for someone that has the upside that he has shown, right? He has the ability to break a slate. He's not 8K like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. He is 6.7. I think he is a value at the price. I think he should be 7.5K. And on a slate where I am struggling for value plays, I'm still considering him as a value at 6.7. I think he's one of the better running backs on this slate. We know they're going to run the ball a ton. We know he's going to be a really good option. They have Patrick Surtain that can lock guys up. The Bills naturally want to run. They're going to be up. Yes, if Josh Allen scores 3 rushing touchdowns, yeah, I'm probably screwed. It is what it is. What can I do? But James Cook is also involved in the passing game. He's not just this 2-down running back. Yes, they do use Ty Johnson a bit, but they use James Cook as a weapon. And on a team that feels like they don't have that, they feel like they have a ton of weapons that they don't really even use. I think James Cook is the best play in this game. I like Shakir as well. He's clearly the wide receiver 1 on this offense at 5.3. He feels like a little bit of a value too, obviously low floor, but I do think Shakir is in the conversation as well as a pretty good play at 5.3K. Now, when it comes to the Denver side, Sutton at 6.6 does feel a little bit pricey to me. I know Marvin Mims just came on at 5.1. Maybe one of you guys has a take on it. I know they're going to be trailing. Bo Nix has looked really good as well. 6.3K. I could see him play pretty good in this game, and I could see this game shoot out a bit more than I think people realize, just because of how good Sean Payton is at crafting up, offensive plays. I think this Bills defense is good, but I don't think it's this defense that you can't score points on. So if I did, I don't mind Bo Nix running him naked. I don't think it's the craziest idea on this slate, especially on a slate where we do not have a ton of value. And if we just want to grab some cheap quarterbacks, there's other quarterbacks that we're going to get to that I like more, but I don't think it's the craziest thing to go to someone like Bo Nix naked in this spot. And then I guess I'll mention Josh Allen. Obviously, he's amazing. He's going to have to put up a monster score. And let's say Josh Allen puts up 40 DK points. Most people would say that's going to be on the winner, no doubt in my mind. But if Baker Mayfield for 1,500 or less puts up 30, he might be on the winner just because of how tight the salary is. Keep that in mind. So I do think you can get away with fading Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's a bad play. I just think I need to save salary somewhere, and I don't want to save salary by grabbing a bunch of 4K receivers that are going to put up 2 DK points. I need to make sure that I'm saving a little bit, and I have to try and do that a little bit at my quarterback position. But overall, James Cook is probably one of my favorite tournament plays on this slate.
DC, the Broncos and the Bills. Now, James Cook, I played a lot of him this year, but there's also been games where it's been complete and total variance in the backfield, where they've gotten Ty Johnson involved, where they've now gotten Ray Davis involved. You really can't trust the passers. So on a 3-game slate, I think I'm backing down the passing options and just spreading it out if I'm multi-entering. Very difficult to choose amongst these guys if you're playing just a couple of lineups. But what are your thoughts here on the Bills and the Broncos?
Yeah, I mean, kind of in theory, a dangerous spot for the Bills. The Broncos surprised everyone this season. Nobody picked them to make the playoffs. Nobody thought Bo Nix was going to be any good. People wrote off Sean Payton, as kind of dusty. And here they are in the first round of the playoffs. They go on the road. They're big dogs. They're playing pretty well. So, they've got nothing to lose, right? Everyone's expecting them to kind of get blown out here. But I don't think the Broncos are going to be afraid. I think they're going to go in here and I think they're going to try some trick plays. I think Marvin Mims, right? Like if they can, I think they're going to have multiple shots drawn up for Marvin Mims, where essentially they're trying to fool the defense into making a mistake, right? Where Marvin Mims gets behind them and you get kind of a wide open touchdown, something like that. Yeah, Mangone. Visit the barber, Mangone. But I do think Buffalo rolls here. The hard thing is to know what to do with them. James Cook at 6,700, I think he's a fine play, but I'm not sure it's going to be all James Cook. I think a lot of teams are going to kind of condense on their RB1. I'm not sure Buffalo is going to be one of those teams that actually does that, so he makes me a little bit nervous. Actually, if I'm playing Buffalo, like they've got everybody healthy now, right? They really haven't had. I mean, they've got Shakir, Cooper, Coleman, Hollins, Samuel. Those 5 wide receivers, I think, are all going to play. I think both Kincaid and Knox are going to be out there. And I think they might play all 3 running backs too. So you're talking, 11 players, I believe, that Buffalo is going to rotate through. And then you've got a running quarterback. So I actually like playing Josh Allen naked by himself because I think he could easily spread it around between all his weapons and maybe Josh Allen that pops up.
Keon Coleman as well.
Yeah,
in the breaks there.
For 40 fantasy points, and everyone's going to try to pair him with someone because all those guys are cheap. I don't think you have to because you're going to need bigger scores out of your wide receivers. So I think you can play Josh Allen naked. I think that'll be a unique way to approach this game, one that I'll certainly be doing on some of my teams for the 6-gamer. Denver, to me, I can't play any of their running backs or tight ends. Knicks, I think, is okay. And then it's Sutton and Mims. I think there are 2 guys in play for the Denver offense.
AP, a lot of people talking about how the Broncos are overrated. Look, the Bills have been good. Every season, though, we come into the postseason saying, here's Josh Allen, here's the Bills, look at them. And they always find a way to get eliminated. Maybe it doesn't happen this week, but what are your thoughts here, Broncos and Bills?
Yeah, I don't know if I can say overrated. I think they're a dangerous team. Like they're a team that they just have a ton of swagger, obviously led by Bo Nix, who's been incredible. Like watching, this is a team that I don't really want to face. Like I don't know why you would want to face the Broncos right now. I do think the Bills at home, they're a beast against a young team. It's hard to pick the upset in the Broncos here, but
forgot I was talking to the biggest Bills fan on the planet. Sorry, go on. This weekend.
No. So, what I'm getting at is Josh Allen, the experience, he's going to will his team to a victory. You have so we talked about, the target tree in the Chargers game, Texans games. We know where those targets are going. You have no idea where the targets are going in the Bills game. We've seen, Ray Davis and Ty Johnson have big games over, a James Cook. Shakir, Coleman, Cooper, Matt Collins, all of these guys could work into the mix. Just isolating it as a single game, it's Allen naked and move on. And there's a lot of other pieces if you're looking at that 6-game slate that you could target around it. I do think from a trailing script standpoint, pricing, Bo Nix runs, you have 2 targets in Sutton and Marvin Mims that I think are extremely viable, especially Marvin Mims and his big play ability. Snyder's been really high appealing to Marvin Mims of late too. So shout out to our guy Snyder. I think how you play it is like a really interesting way to play it is like Josh Allen and then run it back with like Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims. Like if you're looking for the ultimate contrarian way to play this game, I think most people, what they'll do is naturally play Bo Nix, which also makes sense if you're targeting this game. I like this game for points. It's one that there are a few games for the 6-game slate that I'm definitely targeting. This game, and then obviously the 2 last games, Commanders game, the Vikings game. And I think a lot of people will be going down that path. But with how everything is spread out, I'm telling you, there's still going to be people that pound these early games. So that's why in the 6-game slate, I do think that there's an edge to backloading, and it's obviously the better games to target as well.
All right. Josh Engelwoman already talking about the Broncos matchup with the Chiefs, which is interesting. DC, thoughts here on the Bills. Did you talk about the Bills? Talk about the Bills. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on, AP, and talk about the next game. The Packers heading into Philadelphia, 45.5 total. Philly favored by just 5 points here. There's a lot of people that will tell you that they think the Eagles are frauds, that they expect some kind of meltdown like we saw at the end of last season. But Jalen Hurts out of the concussion protocol. He will play. Saquon Barkley, of course, has been great most of the season. On the Packers side, Jordan Love is likely going to play. With the Packers, you have another team where you're not really sure where the ball is going. On the Philadelphia side, a pretty condensed route tree. What are your thoughts on the Eagles and the Packers?
Yeah, I mean, tough to say this team's fraudulent. Eagles defense has been really good. It is interesting. If you go back to what? It was the first game of the season. They played it down in Mexico, I think, on that chitty grass. Everyone was crying about it. That game absolutely nuked. I don't think we're going to see a game similar to that or anything close. The Packers are another team for me that I'm going to be listening to what Mangone says. He's the Packers guy. I have no read on this team. And in my portfolio for the 6-game slate, I don't have a ton of exposure to this game. That could change if Mangone talks me into some Jordan Love stacks. But the problem with Jordan Love, too, is how do you stack them up? You know, there's guessing which receiver is going to go off for this Packers team. Always a difficult decision. We have better tight ends that we've already discussed. I mean, I guess you could take a few shots on Tucker Kraft. I don't like it. I find myself under on this game. We know the Packers love to establish it, love to run the ball. Now the Eagles on the other side becoming a little bit more, one-dimensional around Saquon. I guess we've seen them open it up to A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith down the stretch. Maybe that was due to A.J. Brown crying to get to open up those target shares. But do they revert back to what was working all season, which run the offense through Saquon Barkley? I think that would make a ton of sense here. So I think it's a game that it's going to be a battle, but I think it falls under the total. I think it's like a 23-17 type of game with the Eagles winning. In DFS formats, yeah, if you can get up to Barkley, I think he's fine. If you can, if you want to play Devonta Smith, I think at 5,700, I think he's also fine. But it's not a game that I find myself too heavily on.
DC, thoughts here on the Packers and the Eagles?
Yeah, not a ton here for me. I mean, Jordan Love is throwing for 300-plus yards once this entire season. That was back in week 4. If you look at the recent performances, it's been ugly for Jordan Love and this Packers offense for the most part, outside of Josh Jacobs and his, vulture TDs that he always seems to get, averaging 3 yards a pop. I think I don't get why the Packers, I know it's a 5.5 point line. Feels to me like that is pretty light. I think they should be bigger dogs in this game. Eagles, another team, kind of like the Ravens, whose defense has been coming on strong. I just don't see Green Bay being efficient and moving the ball on offense here going into Philly. missing Christian Watson, right? Who I know he's a flawed player. He's also a player that the Packers can't replace. He's their downfield stretcher. And even when they're not throwing him the ball, he's changing the game in a big way. I think that loss puts this Packers offense, which I don't really like anyway, down yet another notch. I know a lot of people are going to go to Dontavian Wicks here. I mean, this dude's had one good game the entire season. Can't catch. I mean, I think he is one of the more likely chalk pieces to bust on this slate. Yeah. I get why people are playing him. Again, it's really hard to find good value, but I think he's going to be a little bit overowned for my liking. I'm mostly off the Packers. There's no way I'm playing $7,700 Josh Jacobs. If he beats me, so be it. I can't go there. And then the Philly side, I mean, I like their defense a lot here against Green Bay, especially if Jordan Love gets pulled into a game where he's got to throw the ball a ton. It seems clear that the Packers don't really want to do that. I could see that going very poorly for Jordan Love here. And then the Saquon. I mean, we see this in the NBA playoffs, the NFL playoffs, where the usage condenses on the stars when you get all the chips on the table. And these teams are truly, truly playing to win do or die games. Obviously, in the playoffs, Saquon is going to get a big, big workload here. There's no question about it. He's barely going to come off the field. He doesn't need to come off the field. It's crazy when you watch him. Like, he'll get like 6 or 7 carries in a row and just be like, fine, give me the ball. I can do it again. And you could see him get 30-plus touches here. I know he's expensive, but Saquon, I think, is a very, very strong play, mostly off of especially with, Hurts missed. Did he miss 2 weeks with the concussion? I mean, he was even in the protocol.
Yeah, he was in the protocol, but also I don't think he was playing that last week regardless. But go on.
But conceivably, Philadelphia might be a little bit cautious with him, more so than they usually are, which could lead to more Saquon goodness. So I'm mostly off the Philly passing game. This game, honestly, is mostly Saquon or bust for me. I think Dallas Goedert, 3,900, looked pretty good in his return last week. Also an interesting play for Philly, but won't be game stacking this on any of my teams and will be pretty light on this game overall.
Travis, looks like the consensus so far is Saquon and the Eagles defense are the best plays here. Fade Wicks. I think he's someone who's going to come up as a price point play in the optimizer. If you cross him off your pool, you're going to be unique. You're going to get different lineups, and you're likely going to get lineups that are going to do much better in real life. What are your thoughts on the Packers visiting the Eagles?
Yeah, to address a couple questions. Do they not trust Love, or is he injured? To pass, Jerry's asking. Well, that's the thing. This is Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur is from the Kyle Shanahan tree. What does the Kyle Shanahan tree want to do? It just wants to establish the run, right? That's just what they do.
Ever since that loss in the Super Bowl, that was the one time that Kyle Shanahan decided that it was better to throw the ball. But go on.
Yes, no, you're not wrong. But they're going to run the ball with Josh Jacobs if they can, right? If they can do it, that's what they will do. And honestly, if the Eagles are, and they probably will be successful, because I know the Packers have been better against the run this year, but this is Saquon Barkley and the Eagles offensive line, and this Eagles offensive line has been incredible this year. It's been one of the best, right? I'd say Lions is number 1. I mean, Chiefs 2 for offensive line, Eagles 3, and yeah, you could switch the orders around, and I wouldn't argue with it. You know what I mean? So this offensive line is just different. Saquon Barkley, if I can get him, he's a great play. But my problem with this game is everyone's expensive, it feels like, or feels a little bit overpriced for what could happen. And you can make the argument Jordan Love feels kind of cheap at that 5.8K range, but good luck figuring out the stacking partner. I don't really want to figure that out. I just think the guessing game is not worth it on this slate. So, and if the Packers are up, they are going to establish the run with Josh Jacobs. They are going to get him involved. And to DC's point, I don't want to spend 7.7K on Josh Jacobs. I'd rather just find Saquon Barkley for like $800 more. So for me, I'm kind of off this game pretty heavy. I agree with DC on Wicks. I don't want to take a chance on that. If you tell me to pick a receiver, which again, we're spinning a roulette wheel, it's not fun. My lean would be Romeo Doubs. Just because I think he seems like he has stepped up a bit. Jayden Reed has kind of disappeared. I don't feel super confident in that. And if you want a guy that's like a totally off the board play, that if you think the Packers are just getting killed all game, or you're looking for a showdown type play, Bo Melton is going to play the Christian Watson role. So if you're looking for a guy just like to rip like a long touchdown, that would be the guy. But I think that's a stupid decision to try to make on this slate. I want to try to build more balanced type of builds just because I think we're going to need these like studs that are in the mid tier. The balanced builds have been really good this season, and I think I'm going to stress it even more. So for me, I think this game is a really bad game for DFS. I know it's a 45.5 total, but based on the pricing, look at AJ Brown, look at Barkley. Again, if I can get Barkley and it makes sense and he breaks the slate, yes, I want him. But I could see a route where Barkley gets like 28 DK points and he's just not on the winner, as crazy as that sounds. And if there was one Eagle I would like to play, it would be Devonta Smith at 5'7" in that balanced build. There's a chance he could be the guy that really puts up the production. But again, I'm looking at these balanced builds. I really think that they are going to be what wins the slate. Maybe it's a balanced build with like one punt and like you grab a Justin Jefferson, but I really think you have to think about the salary on these slates.
Our guy K. Reed is in here. He says, everyone stop stroking my Eagles. Fair enough. The Eagles are frauds. All right. We will move on. Travis, Brandon, no, Hurts is not safer than Saquon, in the opinion of the gang. And you guys thought that they were slobbering all over the Eagles. Wait until we start talking about this next game. The Washington Commanders heading into Tampa Bay. The Bucks favored by 3, a 50.5 total, Travis. A 50.5 total for Jaden Daniels, for Baker Mayfield, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, Bucky Irving. What else can we talk about in this game? What are your thoughts here on the Commanders heading into Tampa Bay?
Yeah, so this is a super interesting game because I think we're expecting a lot of passing. It's definitely going to be one of the games we target, then the next game coming up. I like this spot for Baker, but I have a question about Mike Evans. Is anyone worried about the Marshawn Lattimore matchup? I guess I'll go to you, DC. Are you worried at all about it? Just because he's had troubles in the past. You're shaking your head now.
No, I mean, Lattimore is pretty dusty at this point.
Okay. I didn't care that much, but I just wanted to ask because I know
listen, Mike Evans, he's not going to get ejected in this playoff game with everything on the line, right? I just don't. I'm not worried.
Are you sure about that?
I'm assuming people are out there, but I just want to call it out because it's a fun storyline for sure. Like if you're fired up this game, they're going to talk about it right at the beginning of the game. It's definitely a fun one. He's expensive though, right? I do like him. I think you are going to have to make a decision between him and Justin Jefferson, which I don't know. I kind of lean Justin Jefferson if you force me to pick one. And I can still get exposure to some of these other pass catchers. Like Jalen McMillan has really came on and finally taken this wide receiver 2 role. I think at that price tag of 5.2K, I think he's a phenomenal play. Another guy who's kind of grabbed the wide receiver 2 role on their team is Almeida Zaccheaus. He dropped a touchdown last week, wide open in the end zone. I know I made him my play of the day, but he's a great play. I think as a value, you got to like him. He's clearly the guy. Sorry, JC, Diana Brown is gone.
Who is this again, Travis? Can you say the name again?
Mr. Zaccheaus. We'll go with that. We'll go with Mr. Zaccheaus. So, but I'm definitely a fan of Big Z. He'll be someone that I definitely get exposure to. Zach Ertz, if you can spend a bit tight end, I mean Zach Ertz is fine, but I'd probably rather get to Mark Andrews like for 400 more. But Zach Ertz has a clear role within this offense. Like I know it sounds crazy in the year 2025 that Zach Ertz is getting meaningful snaps, but it's just true. So overall, I think the pass catchers are better in this game. Bucky Irving, he is 7K now, and I know we've loved Bucky Irving. He's been great. I just prefer James Cook for 300 more or 300 less, right? I think there's better players. Yeah, you want to make a bet right now, James Cook versus Bucky Irving, DC, straight up? I'm in.
Yes, for the max, please. Yes.
We'll do it for lunch. DC.
You say the name Olamide, by the way. He is from Kenya, his native home, Zaccheaus, DC. What are your thoughts here? It seems like we cycle through these Washington wide receiver 2, although for Zaccheaus, this is a guy that Dan Quinn actually, when he was with the Falcons, they would target this guy. He's liked Zaccheaus for a while. Now he's actually paying dividends there in Washington. What are your thoughts on the Commanders and the Bucks? We got someone in here saying that Jade Daniels going to throw for 300, run for 100. They did play I think it was the first game of the season, and Jaden Daniels did rush for 2 touchdowns against this Tampa Bay team. I think Vita Vea might have been out that game, though. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah. Iron Mitch Schneider did allow me into the syndicate this week.
The syndicate, baby.
So I did get some good takes. And one of the syndicate research points, rookie quarterbacks going on the road in the playoffs have really, really struggled over the last 10, 15 years. I think, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, maybe a little wake-up call here in their rookie seasons, maybe ending on a bit of a sour note. I'm off of Daniels at 7,800. I do think there's upside there because I think the Bucs are going to score at will against the Commanders. The Bucs, they almost, at halftime, they were losing their last game. I kind of think they got that, that stinker out of their system a little bit. And I think a wake-up call, perhaps, right? Where we can't just roll just because the matchup looks like it. So I think the Bucs show up big here. We saw Rachaad White, who Bucky Irving was splitting touches with all season. He did not get a single touch last week after fumbling, I believe, in week 17. This is the Bucky Irving show. Honestly, wouldn't be surprised if Bucky Irving got every single touch from the Tampa Bay backfield in this one. Washington, one of the worst run defenses in the league. I think Bucky Irving going to run absolutely hog wild over the Commanders, going to collect that free Mangone lunch money. Going to be a good game here. So Bucky Irving to play. I think Evans is fine, but I don't want to play Evans and Irving. There's just not enough salary, in my opinion, to play both those guys on the 6-gamer. So it's Irving for me. McMillan would be my second play. And then on the Commanders side, I think Zacchaeus, Dimey Brown are okay, but I think it's Zach Ertz. And looking at my builds, I think at least myself going to be almost forced into a lot of 2 tight end builds because a lot of the value plays are these mid 3K, low 4K tight ends, and you got to play them if you want the stars on this slate, which I definitely do. So I'm going to have a lot of Zach Ertz. I think the Commanders, especially in the second half of this game, there's just no way they're going to Brian Robinson Jr. once you get behind. I mean, he's going to be completely phased out of this game for one of my favorite plays on the slate here, Mr. Austin Eckler, back from concussion last week, kind of worked in slowly. He's 4,800 on DraftKings. He looked pretty good before he got hurt in the first half of the year. And, he wasn't out with a lower body knee injury, anything like that. It was a concussion. So at least, conceivably, he should have some pretty fresh legs here coming into the playoffs. I think he's going to be the passing down back when they get behind in this game. I think Eckler could get 6 or 7 catches for 50 yards. Maybe he runs one in as well. So I think he's one of the better values on the slate, Austin Eckler. Just that type of slate where you got to take some risky value. Eckler, one of the guys that I definitely like, will be on a ton of my lineups this week.
AP Rand says game stack this game. It's obviously going to be a popular one. There's going to be some of the more popular plays here in this game, the highest total, the best weather outside of course, the Dome game out west that we'll talk about here in a bit. What are your thoughts on the Bucs and the Commanders?
Yeah, I love the Austin Eckler call. Glad DC brought that up. Someone I'm just from a value standpoint, especially trying to get the Saquons of the world kind of into your lineup and leaning on. So I love the Bucs in this game. I parlayed their money line with Ohio State, and maybe this came from Snyder and his syndicates, but just looking at my portfolio, I have a lot of bets in place right now, the Bucs, and likely due just to that point that DC brought up. So I think they get it done here. I think it's going to be a great trailing script for some of the passing options. But then, Austin Eckler, I think, is a super sneaky option as well. And then Baker stacks. I mean, Baker's just been, if you just look at his performances all year long, I mean, he's put up some monster numbers. I know we want the running quarterbacks. I know we want the, Jaden Daniels, the Josh Allens of the world, but Baker has arguably been just as good, especially from a fantasy standpoint. You have some clear-ish stacking options, Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan, who's kind of really stood out and gotten a lot better towards the end of the season. I mean, he's been an absolute stud. And then Bucky Irving 7K. I feel like it's just slightly too cheap. It's his backfield now. The dude is just an absolute beast. So these are guys that I definitely want exposure to, especially on that 6-game slate. Like when I look at I think I'm running just like 20 builds for the 6-game slate. I'm heavily backloaded to these games. A lot of Commander, Bucks, Vikings, Rams, which we'll get to. I think these are the games that we definitely want to target. Weather looks to be really good. So yeah, obviously going to be a really nice game in DFS formats.
Baker Mayfield ownership looks a little bit low too on the 3-gamer on Sunday, at least according to current projections. So that's certainly interesting. We'll get to the final game of the 6-game slate, the final game of the week, the wild card weekend, the new format. We get a Monday night game, AP. The Minnesota Vikings head into the 14-win Minnesota Vikings playing the first weekend on the road in Los Angeles against the Rams. They're 2.5-point favorites, 47.5-point total. This Minnesota offense has become much more than just Justin Jefferson. In fact, Jordan Addison has been every bit as good as he has been this season, maybe even having more ceiling games than Justin Jefferson has. Where do you go in this one where you've got a lot of very condensed offensive pieces, but also expensive ones?
Yeah, I think the question is, and you got to like that this game is Monday night. Give them a little bit more time to recover from getting absolutely pounded against the Lions. I mean, the Lions embarrassed them. The opportunity was there for the Vikings in that game. They could not get it done, obviously, in the red zone. Something that you think that they would likely figure out. I think this matchup is going to be nice against the Rams. I think when you look at that game, the Lions clearly wanted it more. They're the more physical team, and they did what Dan Campbell always does. They came out and punched him right in the mouth. I mean, it was a really, really impressive performance. You got to think when you just look at this Vikings team and how good they were all season long, I would expect them to bounce back, and that makes me like points in this game. And naturally, I think a lot of people will. I think, too, when you look back to the Lions game, they were forcing the ball to Justin Jefferson, and he had a few drops in that game that normally he doesn't, balls that normally he finds a way somehow to catch. So I know Jordan Addison had his moments throughout the season and had them often, but I think that they're going to rely on their best weapon in Justin Jefferson. I think TJ Hawkinson very much in play. I think Sam Darnold, nice bounce back spot. I could see him having a big game here if you get the right game flow, which I think could happen. Both teams have awesome weapons on both sides, competent offense. You could see that back and forth kind of scoring environment, assuming the red zone efficiency is there. If it's not there, I think it could turn the other way too. But on the Rams side, you get the clear target tree. We know exactly what they want to do. It's all about Puka, Nacua, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp. I mean, what? He's kind of like a decoy now. I mean, Puka Nacua is well beyond him. And so I like the Rams side as kind of staple, the more predictable side, the volume to Kyron Williams. It'll be interesting. Like, the Vikings had no answer for Gibbs last week at all. Like, no answer. I'm not saying that Kyron Williams is up to his level, but I think he's a really nice running back play. Just seeing what I saw last week from this Vikings defense. And then Puka, obviously another nice play too. Just an extremely good floor and obvious massive ceiling from him. So I'm going to have a lot of this game. It's going to be kind of my lineups are going to be like in last place most of the week. And then hopefully we leapfrog everyone at the end.
You got them wherever you want them, AP. As you like
exactly. 100%.
DC, Brandon reminds us this game is in Arizona now, so it isn't a neutral location. They are going to have a fair amount of fans from both sides traveling. I think 52,000 tickets is what were bought by the fan bases of the Rams and the Vikings. And then on the Rams side, of course, everyone is interested in Puka and Kyron Williams, but the guy who's been sneaky in some games this season has been Demarcus Robinson, the deep threat for the Rams, probably the cheaper play in this game, at least on the Rams side. But what are your thoughts here on the Vikings and the Rams?
So starting with the Rams side, I don't like the spot for Kyron Williams. I know Jahmyr Gibbs got there against the Vikings eventually. They actually did okay early on in the game, but, you're going up against they just couldn't convert, right? A bunch of 3-and-outs. They couldn't get the job done in the red zone. And eventually Gibbs is going to get there, right? If he gets touch after touch after touch, you wear him down. And yeah, he kind of exploded in the second half. Kyren Williams is like the opposite type of back from Gibbs. He's a grinder. He's got some of the least explosive runs, least explosive run rate in the entire league. He gets there via attrition. And the Minnesota Vikings still have one of the best run defenses in the league. So I don't think this is a spot for Kyren Williams. I actually think he's a pretty easy and good fade in this game. To me, on the Rams side, it's all Puka. Puka or bust. He's the guy I want. I know he's expensive. Clearly the number one wide receiver. And I mean, no ball take. If you watch this guy play, he is just incredible. Puka Nacua out there. You have to imagine, especially after a week of rest, Puka's going to come out there and get targeted heavily. I like him. I will say Cooper Kupp, like 6,400 is a lot to pay for someone who has not had a good season. The week of rest could have done him some good as well. So I don't hate the Kupp call. I think the passing game with the Rams is where I want to go if I'm attacking Minnesota. But man, what a bounce back spot here for the Vikings. I think they got exactly what they needed in week 18, kicked in the teeth. Obviously, if you look at the scoreboard, dominated by the Lions. If you watch the game, that game could have gone way differently. I think the blowout was almost entirely on Sam Darnold. Listen, biggest game of his life, right? Hyped up all week. The Vikings, the big story. You go into Detroit, it's deafening in the dome. And if you go back and watch the tape, Sam Darnold missed high on, I think, 11 of his 12 throws. Way overhyped, right? You could see it in his face. Like, he was just not quite ready for that moment. I actually think the Vikings offense, O'Connell, called a good game. They picked up most of the early blitzes from Detroit, had open dudes all over the place, and Darnold either didn't see them or missed the throws. So if he makes those throws, it's a different narrative going into this game. And this is a perfect spot for Darnold to bounce back, especially the game in Arizona. The Vikings are going to have more fans than the Rams. There's no question about it. It's not going to be loud. It's in a dome. It's going to be kind of like a sterile environment, right? Which I think is perfect for Darnold and this offense to pick it back up. I think he's going to shred this Rams defense. I think it's going to be a lot of Jefferson. I like Addison as well. Hawkinson, I think, is a good play, especially with Aaron Jones. It looks like legitimately, I think, banged up. I do think he's going to play in this game, but not at 100%. I think the Vikings prove a lot of doubters wrong. And listen, Joe Public hates the Vikings after that game, right? Everybody kind of thought they were frauds all year, kind of overachieving. Then they get to see the big game, right, on Sunday night. Darnold lays an absolute egg, and everybody says, oh, the Vikings are dust. They can't get the job done. They're not a real squad. I don't think so. I think it was all on Sam Darnold. And listen, maybe if he gets in a tougher spot going forward in the playoffs, maybe he'll crater again. Not this week. I think Darnold shreds here, 300-plus yards, 3+ touchdowns. He is my favorite quarterback on the week. Easy to pair up. Two of Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, I think, is the way to go. You can run it back with Puka. I think this game is pretty straightforward, and frankly feel pretty confident that my takes are going to come through in this one. I will say if you are down late on the 6-gamer, don't be afraid to pivot to a super low-owned Cam Akers, who has been involved recently, has looked pretty good. And like I said, Aaron Jones a little bit banged up. Akers could be a guy who gets in there early, right? If Jones just doesn't quite have it, I think they're willing to go to Cam Akers. Could be a low-owned play that gets there at a pretty cheap price point as well.
Lycan is asking, are we locking anyone on the 2-gamer today? And the guy that is going to come closest to that for me, I think, is Derrick Henry. I don't know exactly where I'm going to end up in terms of total ownership, but it's going to be very high because, like I said, I think you're looking at Henry, Mixon, and then Dobbins as your 3 guys that you feel most comfortable in. Henry, far above Mixon and Dobbins for me, guys. Anyone you guys locking on this 3-game slate before we get to Travis to talk about the last game?
No locks for me. But yeah, I love Henry as well.
Henry's close. In any non-Henry builds, it's Lamar. So it's those two are like comboed together. It's like one. I got to have at least one.
You must have one or the other.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Travis?
Yeah, let me talk about this game.
Are you locking anybody on the 2-game slate?
On the 2-game, maybe Lamar. Like, I just think, the Ravens are a team that are just going to shove. You know what I mean? Lamar's always had his postseason struggles. I think this is where he gets right. Has a big game. Snyder's going to be peeling to the Lamar Jackson poster on the ceiling tonight. It's going to be a good night to be Snyder.
Over under 6.5, like Lamar stroking type tweets, like stats and trends posted. Like, what do you think?
I go under because I think it's tough to tweet when you're ingesting so much protein. So it's gonna be up and down. It's gonna be up and down. All right, Travis, talk to us about this last game.
Yeah, I do think it's over for our guy Snyder. He's gonna love it. But all right, JT, I want to talk to you because last week we had a conversation. We had a conversation about a very old quarterback. I talked about the matchup for the receiver, and it was a great matchup. And Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams dialed it up. And let me tell you, let me talk. You're trying to jump in. Hold your tongue. Puka Nacua has one of the best matchups on the board this week. Puka is going to be a great play. I absolutely love Puka. I'm going to be all over him. And I'm playing Matthew Stafford. He's great against the blitz. And what do the Vikings do? DC, what do they do? Since you are a Vikings fan, you know this.
I think everybody knows the answer. Keep it moving, man. Go.
They blitz. Yeah, see, they blitz. Matthew Stafford is going to sling it. We need value on this slate. We are struggling for value on this slate. He is dirt cheap. He's 5.6K. You want to load up on this game. Another good point with this game is it's in California. Or not in California. It's in Arizona. It's not in California. I know the Rams Stadium isn't really a home field advantage anyways, but this is going to be a game where it's not a hostile environment at all, right? This is a game where it's going to be a perfect shootout type of scenario. You're not going to have this home crowd. Like, obviously, the Packers going into the Eagles. The home crowd does matter. We've seen it happen a ton where the home crowd has a big effect. It's not going to have as big an effect in this game. It's in a dome. This is a perfect game for a shootout scenario. So I love Stafford. I love Puka. I'm with AP. I do think Justin Jefferson, it's his time. It's not Jordan Addison's time. So I like going there. I even like Tyler Higbee as a cheap value. He's clearly emerged as having a pretty interesting role in this offense for some of the coach speak. I think Tyler Higbee is intriguing. I don't like Kyron Williams like DC. I don't think he's worth getting to. I'd even rather play Bucky Irving over Kyron Williams. So there you go. But James Cook is still the better play than Bucky Irving. And I don't think I have too much else to say in this game. I guess the Cam Akers take. I did like DC's Cam Akers take. That was someone I was considering mentioning. If you do need value really bad, he is involved in the offense. It's actually kind of been crazy. And Aaron Jones, we know how banged up he gets. He gets so banged up throughout the season, becomes a limited participant. I know a lot of people will see that and just say it's nothing. But then all of a sudden, Cam Akers will be getting a full drive to himself and look really good. And then he'll play more of the game. So Cam Akers is not a crazy punt if you are looking for value. Because, again, on this slate, we do not have a lot of value.
All right. That covers the 6-game slate. Josh Engelwoman now understands how you got that house, which is interesting in and of itself. All right, Travis, who's your play of the weekend?
I'm going to give you two, JT. I'm going to give you a stack, and I'm going to give you a running back. I'm going to give you a little combo. I'm giving you Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua. That's the best quarterback receiver stack, and the best running back is James Cook. So those are my favorite ones from the 6-game.
DC?
We'll go off the board here. We'll go with Austin Eckler. Makes everything work for those all those spends that you want to get in your lineup.
Austin Eckler, AP.
We're going 6-game, right?
Yes.
All right. So we had Mangone. Who was yours? Oh, I'm an idiot. I should not have asked him.
I gave Stafford, Puka, and James Cook. I gave a trio.
Oh, you gave 3? You're cheating.
I feel that good. So there you go.
Yeah. So given a spend, like I think Justin Jefferson's just gonna smash, but That's not sneaky. I love the Austin Eckler play. I'm gonna get I think Devon Vele, just from a value standpoint, the Broncos are going to be trailing. It's going to be the perfect script. Everyone's looking at Mims, Sutton. Vele's been pretty nice. I think he's going to be sneaky 4,100.
Did you even bring him up when we talkked about the actual game?
I don't think he did.
No, because I was saving it for
Now he's the player of the day.
because I was rerunning my
Too
numbers.
much
and
of
he
people
kept
to know about this diamond, this gem.
It's like a rug
Yeah,
pull.
I did not
Actually,
it
Vele's
was
the player.
100%. No, because I agree with like the rookie struggling bonus, but they're going to be trailing in this game. We know you can pass on the Bills, and we know how diversified the Broncos offense is. I think with everyone so focused on Mims and Sutton, especially with what Mims have done, I think it's just going to be a nice, safe-ish type of value play, and you gotta find those if you want to fit these studs.
Okay. All right. I'll go with two that are going to be a little bit lower owned. I mentioned liking Henry a lot on this slate, and I mentioned that at least I think there's more volatility in the production we see from Joe Mixon as well as J.K. Dobbins. So I'm going to play a lot more than the field Justice Hill today as a guy who I think is going to get some run here. In addition, just because of that Zay Flowers injury. And then Jalen McMillan is a guy that the chat has brought up here. As a guy that's a good pivot.
I'm
trying to show this.
I'm going to be doing
have
a
like
serious
4
audit on AP's lineups. I better see a lot of Vele in your lineups, AP.
I mean,
okay, what's a lot? Like I have.
How much you gonna have?
I have 15%
a weekend.
15% is like massively overweight. Is that not?
2% is massively overweight on Devon Vele. It may actually be more than you should play.
Lineup 15% of 20. Like, I mean, yeah.
I'm with you, AP. If you have 15%, you have definitely proven that you are overweight on Devon Vele because he's going to be like 3%. Maybe
it's almost like, I mean, you really should mention someone else. I mean, I think that's where we're at.
What are you talking about? I did. I said one of my biggest stands is Justin Jefferson in that game, but I can't give a spend up. But I'm also trying to fit like the Saquon Barkleys of the world in. And to do that, I gave my pat. To do that, you need these random value plays to get you.
The rare veto on Vele. No, not allowed.
JT's only upset by this because we had earlier in the season he was like, I'm getting way too much Devon Vele. And then that day he scored a touchdown, JT. So you don't like the Mr. Vele.
He scored the first touchdown. He still wasn't useful at all during that. I think it was a showdown slate. So.
Yeah.
All right. Bean Air is betting humans on the outcome, which is something that you could do in Florida. All right. The guys, there'll be core plays up. There are some core plays up already. Core plays up for the 2-gamer. There'll be core plays up for the 3-gamer. There's a couple of articles out for the 6-gamer. And if you ask nicely, DC may put a core up in Discord for the 6-gamer. And that's something that you should be interested in. There will be a Morning Wood show tomorrow. People will be in the Discord all weekend long talking about the NFL because it's too cold and too icy to play basketball indoors this weekend. For AP, Travis, for DC, good luck in your contest this weekend.